This is Weekly Concrete5 Volume 487 or something. This is Katz from Concrete5 Japan community, and I've been doing the weekly podcast. This is the first time that I'll do it in English. I flew into Portland just to film this podcast. Here we go. We have Franz, Andrew, and Korvin from the Concrete5 core team as a first episode of our English podcast. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So, would you briefly introduce yourself?
I'm Franz. I lead Concrete5.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm CTO of Concrete5.
I'm Korvin. I'm a senior developer and I help out a lot with the open source.
All right, thank you very much. So, this Concrete5 podcast is catered to the Concrete5 developer community, open source community, and what's going on in the Concrete5 world. And me, Katz, personally, I just wanted to talk to the people all over the world, Concrete5 community, so I'll be interviewing all the people, Concrete5 group. So you guys has to be the first one, right? So I know you have still some work in progress project going on that you cannot say, so you will have to come back when you can start talking about it. But but first, so last time you produced the video was like beginning of 2016 or something like that, when version 8 coming out. So it's good time to come back and talk about what's going on. So Franz, how have you been since the version 8 launch? From private perspective, Concrete5 perspective.
I've been well. Yeah, so we haven't done a video in a while. 5.7 came out, and then 5.8 came out. There's been a lot of work going into Express in version 8, and we're excited to see what people build on top of that. We've been doing a lot of work with the US government, and that's leading in cool directions for Concrete5, and we're pretty excited about all that. We've been doing a lot of work around running multiple sites out of a single Concrete5 install and packaging that type of work up into a software as a service version of Concrete5 that is really geared for the public sector. So that's been keeping us very, very busy, and a lot of exciting stuff in the works on that, but which I think announcements will be coming before too long around. But that's really where our focus has been over the last year or so.
So how about you, Andrew?
It's been seeing how 8.0 adoption is going. 5.7 was a huge release for us, and there was a lot of sort of excitement, and there was a painful upgrade process in that as well. And then all of a sudden version 8 comes, and while it was backward compatible, I think it took on a life of its own that we didn't necessarily see at the time. Like, we knew it was going to be a big release, but it ended up being almost as big in some ways as 5.7. So just kind of getting all of that together, the multi-site aspect, like what Franz was talking about, really dialing that in, improving performance. That's really what we've been focusing on, and just adding a lot of functionality to it. And I think it's a really great sort of a bedrock for the next 5 years of Concrete5. There's no reason to think that we need to do another holistic upgrade to many components. We have something that's super solid that can grow for years to come.
All right, good. So, well, I'll come back to that version 8 question more later. But how about you? Huh?
Yeah, you guys, Korvin's got cool stuff going.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Korvin. So yeah, Korvin. Actually, Korvin, like, you haven't really came up to the video from PortlandLabs
really
stuff.
On
So would you introduce more? Like, maybe many Concrete5 folks community don't really know how you look like. Like, you grew beard. Like
yeah, it's mostly the beard. This is how I look. A good thing about me is that I don't have a nickname. I just go around calling myself Korvin. So if you recognize the name Korvin, that's me. There's not too many of those out there, so.
So what have you been doing that last?
Well, along the same lines, version 8 was a big release in terms of different kinds of functionality and making it easier to move sites around and host them in more complex ways. So I've been focused on that aspect of things, kind of the operations level aspects of concrete5. So one of the things that I've been working on is the Composure-based concrete5 install. So today you can install concrete5 completely through Composure, and you can even install and manage packages through Composure, and even ones that are in the marketplace today. So that's pretty cool, and that's kind of where I've had my nose focused.
Oh, really? Marketplace, Composer? Would you tell me more about it?
Well, all of our free add-ons right now are available through I think it's composer.concrete5.org. We use a C5 market, I believe, namespace, and then we just use the handle of the package as the package name. So you can just say Composer require C5 market, and then any of the free add-ons that we have available and that are compatible, and that'll manage pulling it down and pulling in dependencies and stuff like that.
Good job. Cool. So next question. So version 8 is out. Maybe many people haven't touched the version 8 yet. So would you try to go back and explain about version 8 itself, and then tell me about it?
Yeah, version 8 is what you should be using. It's the natural evolution from version 7. You can upgrade from 7 to 8, unlike from 6 to 7. And as I'm sure you know, there's some pretty deep changes in 7 from the bottom up. That's why you had to migrate, not upgrade. And it takes a while for some of that stuff to trickle out. So some of the ideas that kind of first emerged in 7 really had a chance to mature in 8. And definitely there are spots where there's going to be a lot more functionality added, particularly around Express. But in terms of, as Andy was saying before, bones being solid and things not changing that you can depend on, I feel like we're pretty much there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just at a high level, version 8, we, for someone who, just finally got themselves upgraded to 5.7, and they're like, oh, what's this new thing for a new site or something along those lines?
Again?
I know, right? The sort of big high-level things that we added what Franz is referring to as Express. That's basically just data objects that you can define in the dashboard and relate to each other. They don't have to be tied to pages or files or anything like that. And those are mainly for developers, but you don't need to be a developer to work with them once they're set up. And we upgraded, upgrade is such a loaded term. We changed from redactor rich text editor to CK editor, which happened so long ago that we forgot about it, but that's working really nicely. Feels like that project's super stable, gonna go on forever, and we're pleased with that. So a bunch of interface changes, little things and refinements under the hood, and bigger things too that I'm just spacing.
Folders and files.
That's right. Folders and stacks and file manager. Mm-hmm. In 8.2, more recently, we tightened up a lot of performance issues that came in version 8, particularly around the file manager, stuff like that. Added some nice functionality to the file manager with moving files and folders around. And then ML Kadi did a lot of good work on translations and stuff in concrete5. So we had been relying on transeffects.com to translate the core, and recently we have switched to a homegrown system that he worked on primarily, that's hosted at concrete5. It can translate packages and the core, and you can download those translations, right when you install concrete5. And those are the types of changes that are in 8.2.
Korvin?
I think what has me most excited about 8.2 is 8.0, I guess, is along the same lines, but a little bit different. One of the things that the legacy version of concrete5 really had going for it was The dependencies that we used, we had been using for the better part of a decade. So all of those things we knew top to bottom, and left to right. So when we did the whole version 7 change, we had to use dependencies that we didn't have an experience with, at least not the same kind of experience. So I think version 8, to me in my mind, the biggest thing that is over version 7 is just us understanding how to use our dependencies better. And I think that's pretty much Express for you. Us understanding how to use our dependencies better and to implement things using them better. So.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that, Korvin's right. Like we kind of upgraded a number of internal components, just as PHP's modernized, and we kind of understood mostly why that was good, but now it's part of the actual workflow of writing the libraries as opposed to having to figure out how do I use this again in this to write this code. Like we're a lot faster with it, and then under the hood we use a lot of Doctrine ORM, and it's been like 5 years, but now I think we can finally say like I pretty much understand how that all works. So it's finally it's starting to speed up development rather than being something we have to kind of research every time we need to work with.
Speaking of version 8, so why did you come up with the concept of the Express? Who first came up with the concept of Express?
Oh, I think it is self-explanatory, right? When you use concrete5 a lot, the editing experience is designed to be really tactile and just like a word processor. You don't really need to train. You can just kind of start playing with it and it makes sense. And that's great, but we do projects that are much more large and complicated than just what you would do with a website builder. And so just kind of project after project, we would find that we needed some way to deal with more strongly typed data. And so we used to use page types for that. Say, oh, okay, like a calendar event, that's a page type, or we would make page types for what would be a data object in an application. And then that kind of married it to its presentation layer, and that wasn't great. And so it just kind of became an obvious thing that like, well, while sometimes content is organic and you want to let presentation kind of dictate things, other times you really want the data model to be the source of truth, and you want to be able to have a CRUD interface automatically scaffolded out for you and all the kind of stuff that Express already does or will obviously clearly do in time. So it just felt like a missing half to the CMS for a long time, and now we have it.
Yeah, I mean, there were any number of projects and times when we would be working with something and we would find ourselves wishing that we could just use custom attributes for whatever it was we were building, and then we would just kind of think about, well, maybe is there a way we can just graft this onto the page model because it gives us custom attributes or something along those lines. And so it just kind of became a natural thing where, wow, wouldn't it be really nice to have just generic objects that could have those attributes. And there were also add-ons in 5.6 and earlier that did that kind of thing, and because some developers understood that before we did, honestly. But one thing that Express does that none of those that I saw did, it adds association between those objects, which that was the second thing that we got the attributes working in it pretty fast. But Franz was always pretty clear, like one of the things that makes this so potentially powerful is that if we can associate these things together as opposed to just having them be one-off objects. Like that's useful, but that's just like a form submission. Like, okay, that's useful, but is there a way we can do a little more with them? So
how many times have you run into some somewhat savvy project manager type that has built something out of FileMaker that is now live on the web, half broken?
Microsoft Access
on the web. Like there is just a need to be able to quickly build out a simple relational database. And maybe that is just the bones, and you're going to spend 1,000 hours turning it into an online community, and it's going to be a bunch of custom interfaces. But maybe not. Maybe you just need a simple database on the web. So we want concrete5 to be appealing to folks who have that scale of need, not just a 6-page brochure site.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think the only thing worth adding to that is that Express was kind of like one of the most organic things that I think has come out in the last few years, because like Franz was saying, we had challenges that we were dealing with on every project, and we recognized those challenges, and at some point came back and said, there's a way we can fix this so that we're not continually doing this, and we can, fix this for good for everybody moving forward. And so we came together and discussed it, and some things changed, and ultimately we ended up with something really good. So I think that it's a really good example of the organic process that drives a lot of these things that come into concrete5.
I know, like you said, the FileMaker people, Access people will get it like right away. Oh, this is powerful too. But many web developers who has been just making a website, like Andrew, your YouTube example was awesome. Your wife hair salon example was great to explain.
A concrete. Don't cut that. Ken. Don't. Like just kind of a real world example for a web developer, I thought would be important. And honestly, as I was building it for her, I was like, man, I don't want to use Pages for this. We need to use Express for this. It's made for it. So yeah.
So what else? Like, so would you be able to say some example of, or you don't have to say the name of the website, but would you give us example of some community member who you have heard about how they take advantage of the Express or your own project?
Yeah, sure. So I think we've seen people thinking of Express in two different ways. Some folks are using it, and both are great. Some folks are using it to build small relational databases, just as we kind of implied. So where you might have done like a custom add-on before or something, or I'm going to build a bunch of dashboard interfaces. Now you can just use Express and make it happen. We helped some agency build something. What were they doing? Putting boats in marinas, or I forget what it was, but I remember digging into it. And
yeah, I don't.
Fix a relationship object for them or something.
Oh yeah, there were some Express bugs that you helped someone iron out, and I don't remember what they were actually using Express for.
Oh right, I don't think I ever got the details on that.
We have no idea what we're talking about. They were building something.
It was like that though.
But it was. There were dogs and they needed to be matched to dog walkers, or I know Jedis that needed to be matched to a planet. Something that has a relational object. You guys can figure this out on your own. And so that's like one whole silo, right? Like I've got this client, and I don't want jobs to be a page. I want jobs to be a database, and I'm going to reuse them in different ways. Well, move that to Express. That's great. The other side of things is working with third-party data and thinking of a content management system really as content management, that you need a glue that lets you share data between disparate systems. So maybe you're using SAP to track your product information, and you're using Salesforce to track your sales leads, and you're using Zendesk to do your support, and you're like, gee, it sure would be cool if we could let our customers get in here, register a new product, which means they've got to create a record in Salesforce against product data out of SAP and open a support ticket. So, you'd like to keep using all these third-party systems because they work great. Each one of those tools does a whole lot that we're never going to do. But if you're thinking about the content that those tools create, it'd be nice to get a copy of that out and use that on your website for different purposes. And so in the big picture, I see Express turning into that as well, of being the hook that third-party tools use to get data in, so you can build different stuff in concrete5 with a copy of that data. That's kind of silo 2.
Do you have any example, Andrew?
Not of the second one, but yeah, we did some work for a college recently, and kind of anytime we had a lot of these gigs where people would come in with something along the lines of, we need the document library but for X. So we don't want files served up on a page. Anytime you need the document library for, but not for documents, any kind of library, knowledge base, this type of stuff, sometimes those can be handled with Pages, and there's real benefit to having them be Pages. But in this example, it was kind of a searchable database of articles, but the articles themselves were off-site, or they linked to arbitrary locations. And in the past, you might have a bunch of sort of proxy pages that just pointed elsewhere, and it's an inelegant way to manage your website. Where Whereas now you can just kind of create a data object and its category data object, tie those things together, and then put a custom block on the front end that brings that data in. So that just those kinds of problems where in the past you might have burned a couple days making custom interfaces in the dashboard and custom PHP data objects. Now you can scaffold that out in like an hour and then and get it looking, you know, it may not look great, but it functions completely, and then you spend the rest of your time making it pretty.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think an example maybe for the second half, we don't have an, I can't think of any that we would, you know, have an actual physical website that's using it, but one thing that I can imagine that being used for is tracking things like messages through a different service. So in my head, what I'm thinking of is like changes in GitHub. Somebody posts a message that you might just want to collect that raw data and then decide what you want to do with it later. And I think that's kind of what Franz is getting at, where you can have this data be thrown into kind of a repository without you needing to know how you're going to interact with it later.
That's right. Let concrete be the glue that brings your data together.
Yep. Good. So what's new version 8.2?
Translation stuff, like I mentioned earlier, it's actually a pretty big update. I think it was about 6 months since the last one, just because we got deep in some other things, and then it quickly became so large that we kind of needed to make sure that it had enough time for testing, and so we had a fairly long release candidate stage for a subversion. And the translation stuff, performance improvements, navigating the file manager improvements, a lot of thumbnail work, tons of bug fixes. It's a long list of things.
8.2 was the first version to support Composure as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's really helped our deployment workflow a lot. Having that type of setup, it's very handy.
I think it's mostly just bug fixes, performance improvements, and there's not too many big features. I think the majority of 8.2 in my head was improvements to Express and improvements to those different workflows, like I was saying with the Composure.
Good. So what's the what's up in next version? It's going to be 8.2.2 or 8.3.0. What's the plan?
I think we're thinking 8.2.2 sooner rather than later. Definitely not another 6 month. Oh, I mean, we didn't do 6 months since 8.2.1, but yeah, I think we're looking at switching to a more reliable release cycle. We've said that before, but we're still looking. It's not a huge release, although we are getting some big features, mostly coming from the community at this point, that are coming in. Developer focused, but cool nevertheless. We just accepted a pull request from M. Locati, who's a superhero lately, who by himself added a geolocation framework to the core and integrated the plugin for it. That you can then add more advanced plugins that you might pay for for your own site. Stuff like that. So sort of underlying system level stuff, bug fixes and performance enhancements, and I think we're looking at doing that sometime in the next few weeks, honestly.
I think we're getting on a much more close to a monthly schedule in these releases, and really trying to take the time to put polish on things that historically we might have scaffolded out and say, look, here's Express, enjoy. Now we're getting more of a chance to actually come back and, hey, this needs searchability and paging and some of these relationship objects.
That's a big one from 8.2 was we added the ability to search Express objects.
Probably want to find stuff in there. Just a lot of corners like that. Flushing out corners.
Yeah, I remember my developer was talking about that too. Yep. Ooh, what is this change in GitHub?
Well, I think Express is like a brand new tool in the toolbox, right? It's like we went around solving all these problems with the tools that we had, and like, you're thinking, boy, it'd be really cool if we had a hammer in here. And as you kind of think about it, you realize, well, hammer's cool, but it needs that claw to pull nails out too, and maybe I should have a stronger handle and that kind of thing. So it takes a few revs to get it right.
Okay, so next question is the roadmap. I mean, I kind of asked you already what's the new feature coming up in the next version, but of course I know you can't really tell yet for the really big picture, but vaguely, would you explain to us that what are you planning the concrete5 to be in like long term?
Yeah, there's exciting stuff in the works that, as you imply, is still can't be talked about. I think in the last few years you've seen a lot of consolidation in the CMS space, as you would in any industry. Once it kind of gets out of the, gee, could we get rid of the horse and make these cars, and then all of a sudden you get all these little companies, and then they kind of get consolidated down. So there's been a lot of that, and I think with version 7. When we started thinking about version 7 and kind of redid the whole interface from version 6, I mean, we started that thinking like 2013 or 14. We were working on that as we kind of forked things, and like it's taken a while. And at that point, it was still pretty squishy. Like, Squarespace, Weebly, Wix, the whole kind of web builders thing, that was still competing with Drupal and Joomla and more frameworky kind of things, and now I think you see a little bit more segmentation. There's like it's kind of become clear that if you just need a 6-page website that's never going to change, there's a lot of hosted solutions out there that do that just fine. So I think you're asking where we're going to be in 5 years, more on the application side. Always still with a focus on user experience and the idea that it's our job to serve the balance between what developers need to work with and the people that they're selling it to who need to actually own the site would like to have. And I feel like our kind of attention to that experience has been really helpful as a product differentiator. But you got to be able to build beefy apps. The folks that we're working for are household name brands and have 100% uptime kind of needs. So I think you'll see more and more stuff cooked into concrete5 that lets you do that kind of beefy application stuff. I mean, where Korvin is focusing on being able to kind of automate provisioning through command line tools and PHP Composure. Some of the stuff you see cooked into version 8 there's a site object. So we're not shipping with a multi-site support built in it yet, but you can, if you dig around in there, you can get a sense of like, oh, okay, like there's a site object, I can put attributes on it. It should be reasonably clear where we're thinking in the big picture with that kind of stuff. So I would expect to see larger and larger sites built with concrete5, and things that get out of the I think for a long time it was easy to look at our in-context editing and think that defined us because we did it so early, and nobody else was really doing it when we first went open source. Remember our first OSCON, and we would show that to people and be like, whoa, this is incredible. It's like I can fix a typo right there. And now that's not quite as compelling. It's like, okay, yeah, like most commercial solutions do this, and like that's cool. So for us it's kind of, well, how can we take that experience of, hey, this should feel intuitive and easy to work with, but bring it to a client base that needs a flexible framework to build powerful websites. So that's where we're heading.
Yeah, just to kind of extend on that, I think you'll probably see a greater decoupling of the kind of user interface and the application with the data underneath, so more focus on an API to get data out of concrete5 without actually perhaps using the CMS directly to do that. I know that's something we've been talking about wanting for a long time, and I think that will be stuff that we continue to have on our plate. And yeah, we have always, like you said, served the balance of site owner and site developer, but for a few years ago we were kind of thinking, well, maybe we're the CMS for just the site owner more so than the site developer, and now it's clear that like, no, you don't want something to be painful for the site owner to use, and if it's good for them to use, that helps you with both them and the developer, but we're really speaking to those who are building those sites for themselves and for other people. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so along those lines, my head is kind of focused on essentially all those things, just the individual pieces. So performance in dealing with multiple objects from the database when we don't know how big those things, how long those lists are going to be. Things along those lines, improving the performance there, and making it so that the overall CMS is more flexible so that we can do those things. And that's kind of where my head's focused, and that's why that Composure stuff has been coming through too. It's to make it so that we support as much as we need to do, and that's where I've been focused.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, thank you very much. So enough of the big picture stuff. So I'm going to kind of go into the detail questions. My colleague from concrete5 Japan Inc. Engineer gave me a couple questions, and also I took a look around some forum and questions and Japanese users as well. So I'm going to narrow it down to more detail. So well, this is kind of also big picture too, but what are the plan of the release schedule? Because you already mentioned about you're gonna make more clear, rapid release schedule. So what is the you plan for it?
Well, I can't make any commitments today, Katz, as you know. I mean, we have always wanted to be on a very regular release schedule. Like, there's no reason that we wouldn't want that. I think people would expect that out of us. I think it's easy to forget that, we are but human. And we started as a full-service interactive media shop back in '02, and we sell websites too. So, these days we have been able to, we don't do any creative work, we don't do any strategy or marketing. So, we're not really competing with what a web shop does, really more of a software company these days. But, concrete5 is free. And most software that is on a lean development cycle is not. So it's a little challenging to promise that every Tuesday you'll get a new release when there's a community of a million sites out there that are all forked in weird ways, and we're trying to pay the bills. So I think historically, our release schedule has been when we have time. Thank you very much. That's never been the ideal. That's just been the practical reality of it. That said, there's with larger clients and larger projects, there's more of an opportunity to kind of silo things down and say, look, there really just is a fixed release schedule, and if we can't get it in this month's release, we'll get it in that month's release. And we've been heading that direction ourselves. We've been managing a few client projects that way, where it's like, look, websites often have this kind of a big rush and then it's over, large upfront costs and then they're gone. And we've been kind of restructuring things so it's more of a, you're subscribing to managing an application, and that application will improve over time. And that puts us in a spot where we really can take more of an agile kind of lean development model of, here's the features that we might be able to get done this week, and we're only going to do 70% of them because the next 30% will happen the week after. And that is serving us really well. So we would love to do more and more of that. And if we have our druthers, we'll be able to make more formal commitments to the community around that. But not today.
Yeah, I don't really have too much else to
right,
say.
what are you going to say?
Yeah.
I'd love to give you a release every day.
Yeah.
You don't pay me that much.
All right, any thing that you try to improve, like for example, you in order to speed up the release cycle, like for example, you added PHP Composure stuff.
Yeah, I think we're going to adhere to a better branching strategy for some of this stuff. We've been using kind of the Git flow model of branching for a few years, but it hasn't always been done. I don't know. We've been working on such large updates for the last few years with 5.7 and version 8 that there's been no way to get around this uncomfortable place you find yourself in when what you know is in the develop branch is just completely not ready to go, and you have no recourse but to just wait until it is. And hopefully at this point we are, at a stable enough place with version 8 with no major architectural updates coming down the pipe for a while, that where we'll really be able to say, like, we can really count on what's in the develop branch of Git being stable enough to do a release every month and to make a release branch from, and when we decide it's time to have that cutoff point, and really not getting to a place, not letting the core get to a place where what is in the develop branch is so wildly experimental that we can't, put it out in 2 weeks if we need to.
Well, I think ultimately the place where we'll get sooner than later in terms of like a stable release flow will be that we have an idea when the next release is going to come, and I think that's going to have delays. I think we're going to end up delaying that every once in a while, and stuff like that. I'm not sure that the flow that we have and the community that we have is really asking for like a release every month. I think instead the value on having like these are the things that we want to get done in this release, and here's when we think we can get it done. I think that's what's going to be valuable in terms of like improving the release cycle. But those are just thoughts and feelings.
I do think that not getting ourselves into a situation where we can't do simple bug fixes because we've got some fancy new thing that we're cooking up is different and important and probably key to everything that we're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw a question on your list about a roadmap, and that's kind of what Korvin was getting at too. Like, we don't have one of those right now. I mean, we have general ones, but honestly, you correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't really have a roadmap for the near future, like in terms of bigger. I mean, we have an enormous issue list of things we know we want to fix.
Right.
But in terms of a general strategy, I mean, we have a strategy too, but we don't. I mean, we're not waking up saying there's Express, and we got to get Express done for version 9.
That's right. There aren't 300 pages of wireframes on some new magical thing that we haven't started coding yet.
Like a feature level change.
No, I mean, I do think that you touched on it a little bit with the API. This is the next thing that we talk about on like plane rides and stuff. Is like there's got to be a way through JavaScript to put something on the page that doesn't go through MySQL and PHP as much. That's a little bit lighter, that can handle things like personalization, A/B testing, multivariant testing, and banner ads, like some way to deal with that kind of stuff. So that is a big picture idea that nothing much exists on in code, but occasionally gets written up and probably will be coming down the pipe before that long.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I can tell you things that we're not going to do.
A negative roadmap.
A negative roadmap. we will not be building e-commerce in 2025.
Oh, you can tell me about that. So yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
There's already a great solution.
There's a great solution for an e-commerce.
It's
there's an e-commerce community store in GitHub, and it's an active project, and those guys are running with it. It does everything that we would need it to do.
Great.
Internally, here's an exciting announcement. We're considering using it to rebuild the marketplace one day.
Oh.
Probably news to you.
Yeah, rebuilding the marketplace is not news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just think for us, it's like, it's been a long adventure. And certainly early on, in the early days, we took a, why not kind of approach. We could build that too, kind of approach. And that's fun and exciting, and I think that definitely got us, a wide feature set that was helpful at the time. But I think we've also learned through experience that, if you're not willing to do the ongoing work to really keep your solution at 100%, you can get things 90% there pretty easily, and that last 10% is really hard. So if you're not passionate about e-commerce, don't build an e-commerce system. If you're not we use Zendesk for our own support now because those dudes seem to like, and ladies, seem to like love support. Like they blog about support and the act thereof. That doesn't do it for me. I need support. I don't love support. I need a tool to do it with, right? So for us, we feel very passionately about content management. I mean, we think that we're making a way to express yourself, and that humans come together around communication, and we're building a tool that should be free, that everybody can have, should be easy to put your thoughts on the web. And when I dropped out of college in the 90s, like this was standard fare. Like it was not a big deal to be like, oh, this is going to be the great unifier. Everyone can compete with IBM. And it's not. It's hard to build a website. And now a lot of places that you would put your content, you put it there and somebody else owns it just because you needed an interface to put it up. No one's making an HTML file and sticking it in their college web hosting account. People are just making an article, myself included, making an article on Medium because it's a nice editing interface. Well, that's cool and all, but that's not really the decentralized democratic web that we grew up with. So I think for me, and I believe these guys, that's still very motivating and exciting to be part of. And in order to do a good job at that, I think you have to shave off other things and say, like, we're not in the e-commerce business. There's plenty of other people are. If you want to run a simple store, there's quite a few hosted services that'll do it for $30 a month. I can't compete with them. If you want to power that bad boy out of SAP, you can do that too. Like, we would love to be the glue that brings these disparate systems together. That definitely falls into the realm of content, but we're a content management system. We're not everything to everyone.
So e-commerce, there's a community add-on, so people can use that. It's powerful, but core team is not planning to do it. Anything? Well, it's good to know so that if community member is interested, maybe people can get together, start developing it. What else you are not planning to do?
What else are we not planning to do?
One thing that's probably worth mentioning along those lines is I think we're trying to find different places where we can carve away pieces that we've owned, but maybe don't have the passion for. So something like e-commerce is a really good example because they were able to take that over and from what I've seen, really hit it out of the park and take over that aspect of the ecosystem, because that's what we have. It's an ecosystem. And if we're the only ones contributing into the ecosystem, it's less of an ecosystem and more of like a single product store.
Field of corn.
And so like I've really enjoyed and really appreciated seeing more and more community members take over different aspects like that in our ecosystem.
Yeah, like thumbnail system, local, and the translation system. So people from the community who are good at those things, we can take over enhancing the core itself too. Cool. So how about forum?
How about forums? Yeah. Forums are squishy.
I'm not sure that we're prepared to say we aren't going to do those.
I'm not sure we are.
I mean,
it's so tough.
It would be. But at the same time, if there were community forums that were at the same level of maturation that Community Store is, we might. I don't know.
I think there's two answers. Surprisingly, Andy, I think there's two answers to this question. I think the practical answer is what's going to happen on concrete5.org. And I think that's reasonably easy to address it. So I think if you're looking to find us, you'll find us in Slack. Korvin's all over public-facing Slack. Go to slack.concrete5.org. It'll sign you up. And, it's kind of halfway between chat and forums.
Concrete5.slack.com, yes.
No, you go to slack.concrete5.org because you have to sign up.
You have to it'll make you got to do a little dog and pony show. But it's a good place to be. There's a lot of members in there. They're active. They can help one another. It's way more approachable than like IRC. And you can make these nice rooms in there, and there's some pretty active rooms. So documentation has started to kind of take legs in there, and there's some folks who are making a committee to kind of run with the documentation site, and that has very much come out of just the conversations that are happening in Slack. So, you know, if you're thinking back, if you're asking about forums in Concrete5 and like what happened to the days of Franz and Andy replying to every forum post and these long-winded threads in there, that's not coming back. It's not a healthy use of our time to be wandering around there in the forums. If you've got real problems and you're not getting real answers, jump in Slack and you'll get them there. I think as a developer, you know, it's fair to say, well, look, that's cool and all, but Slack's pretty ephemeral, and it'd be nice to be able to search and find some technical answers to stuff. We keep coming back to Stack Overflow as a great place to do that, and we should be doing more of that. And I think technically driven questions, how do I do this in Concrete5, probably belong in Stack Overflow, and as we look at ways to rebuild concrete5.org, we'll push more towards more of that. And so I can imagine kind of architecting ourselves a solution where we don't have to build forum software for our own needs. So that's the one answer. The other answer is, as Andy implies, like, dude, you know, like, forum posts are content, and we are a content management system. So there is a conversations block built into version 7 and 8 that is pretty powerful and was intended to be this. We got rid of the guest books, and we were going to kill the forums as an add-on and just drive it out of the conversations block. And I feel like it's probably not wildly far from what it would need to do that. It's more of just how do you make kind of the forum areas. And so I know, you know, particularly as we're talking about, look, you should be using Concrete5 to build more applications, and you know, some of the work that we're doing with the U.S. government. I know some of the stuff that you guys are doing with intranets, like, hey, can I drop a forum in here? Is a pretty fair question. And so I think there probably will end up being some lightweight and very safe to use forum. I also like the idea of just integrating with other stuff that exists. You know, PHPBB has been around being a forum for an awfully long time.
They're still kicking.
They're still doing it. Like, and more power to them. So why would we want to compete with those guys? They're nice. So I think ways that we could do single sign-on with that kind of thing, like, that's definitely very interesting. Some of the stuff that we're doing with the government really requires us to be managing all the data. So you get into compliance questions, and okay, now wait a minute. If people are posting messages into some database somewhere, who owns that, and is that safe? And so as we get kind of tasked to solve those problems for the government, you may still find us having to backtrack a little bit from look, that's not content management. Why would I solve that? It's like, well, because it is content and it does need to be managed, and we can't just plug in a black box and hope everything's okay. So we are looking at things like, you know, ad servers. Well, plenty of those exist, but we kind of need one integrated, and I could see forums kind of going that way.
I think there's two challenges there. There's the one kind of old style forum where it's literally that's all you have. You have a logo, but then you have a forum.
Topics and categories.
Right, and I think that's kind of dying. I think this era's forums are more comment sections. Like, even sites like Reddit are pretty much just a comment section attached to a bit of content. And I think that the people, like the Stack Overflow guy, Jeff Atwood, who they built Discuss? Discourse.
They're different than
and then there's Discuss, you know, and Quora too. These are all kind of solutions that popped up in the same time frame that all kind of basically enable commenting on existing content. And I think that's where things are going. And I don't really know how that applies to concrete5.org. But
it's interesting, though. I mean, it is definitely about communication and content and people connecting through the internet.
Yeah, and I think Conversations is like 100% solution for that second.
Yeah.
It's just kind of morphing that comment section to be more of a forum, like topics and subjects and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, that's kind of how we envisioned our conversation stuff filling the void of the forums, where, you know, you basically be creating, you know, pages for the top level post, for lack of a better word, and then there'd be a conversation block on it. And that's basically what concrete5.org's section is once you actually get down to the message. It's just, you know, because it's got the big piece of content and then the responses. And I agree. I don't think we'll ever have an interface that looks like the sort of multi-paged flat list
Yeah, and I think
PHPBB style.
I think that's where you start looking at PHPBB and integrating over, rebuilding it ourselves. If you want that forum, that mid-90s forum feel.
Yes. This is more of a conversations, but conversations that anyone can post to, rather than, a blog post that has a comment section on it.
Right.
This is stuff like that, yeah.
Marketplace, I know it's kind of hard to answer, but what is the plan for now?
The marketplace works amazingly well, and the PRB particularly so. So, the work that we invested, I don't know, back in 2013, I think, or 12, or whatever, to kind of decentralize the PRB and let that system run itself a bit. So if your add-on passes the automated tests, it will be approved in time unless it's kind of red lighted. That's working great. So no need to reinvent the wheel. I think in the big picture, we will end up rebuilding the marketplace just on a more recent version of Concrete 5. It's still based on 5.6. We're no rush to do it. It's not broken. When we do that, here, I'll officially say this right now. When we do that, we're going to stop selling version 6 add-ons. So that will happen. So that's probably a pretty good indicator as to when end of life of version 6 will happen, is when you see the marketplace rebuilt and it's just version 7 plus add-ons and themes. We're not selling anything for it. It makes it pretty clear that we don't want you using it.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be, when and if we get to the point where we're rebuilding the marketplace, which is definitely something we would like to do, it will just be a single marketplace, and it may not have, that marketplace has grown very organically over time, and there is an awful lot that it does. Just special offers alone, I don't think people really understand how much is going on inside of special offers. You can put add-ons and themes from different developers together, and there's a whole workflow for everybody to approve them, and it's really very thorough, because we had imagined at the time, people are going to put together recipes for Concrete 5, and I want your image gallery and my theme and this e-commerce ad, and no one does that. They don't need that. It's a lot of functionality to support that. There's got to be a simpler way to offer a discount. Yeah. So I think we'll probably we'll rethink some of that kind of stuff, and let that go.
Yeah, we have a pretty detailed plan for how the legacy concrete5.org, it's the concrete5.org community site that's running today, that runs the marketplace. It runs the kind of developer sections, the bug trackers, the forums, how that will be and the community profiles and stuff, how that will be broken out into a couple different self-contained Concrete 5 sites, much like our marketing site, which is a version 8 site, and our which is what you see when you go to www.concrete5.org, and the documentation site, just as a way to make it less of a monolithic, enormous Concrete5.org, because it really is enormous, and just break that into discrete parts that handle different things more elegantly. And there is a definite plan, not a timeline, but there's a detailed plan for how we want to do that.
That's the right idea. And as we look at things where we're like, look, can't we use Stack Overflow for technical questions? The answer to that has to be yes, because people are asking technical questions on Stack Overflow and they're not getting answers. So it's silly for any software product to not have a strong presence there these days. But that doesn't mean that we want to give up the power of our community. And you can tell who has put the work into the community because of the karma system and the badges and the profiles, and we don't want to lose sight of that. So I think the first step to that would be separating out the member profile thing and having, right now we got the marketing site, we got the doc site, and then we got the legacy, which is kind of like everything that we haven't gotten rid of yet. So I think the next step there would be, here's the single sign-on provider. This is just your My Account area and maybe your purchase history. And if we can hook that into GitHub, Stack Overflow,
awesome.
And start pulling data out of that, that would get us all the benefits that we have of kind of building everything ourselves always. but also get us the advantage of letting people who are passionate about what they do run with it.
No.
We all love it.
Marketplace. Maybe I want to add licensing, managing licensing. So, for example, I have a Japanese user who took over a site who didn't have a user ID and password for the concrete5.org marketplace, so they cannot transfer the license and stuff. Why should I do that then?
Well, I mean, if your site's connected to the community through a project page, you'll still be able to get new versions of the add-on. Like, you can pull down, when you go hit update inside of Concrete5, it'll go hit, so it doesn't ask you to log in. It knows that your site has this license. So,
but they can add the license to the add-on.
Oh, they want to add new stuff? Well, okay, they use the contact form, let us know. We'll add them to that project page and they can add new stuff. So the way project pages work today is that you can add multiple users to a project page, and anybody can contribute a license to the project page, and you can release a license from the project page as well.
As long as you own it.
I think within a certain period of time. I think we turn that off after a certain period of time. But if you release the add-on or the theme from the project page, it goes back to who owned it. It doesn't go to who you are, because that would be a really sketchy way to
steal
borrow
every
stuff.
site's add-ons.
So generally, I mean, we've talked about, I have pushed for, I don't see why we don't just let people add themselves to project pages, and these boys have wisely said that's probably not the smartest idea ever.
Just make a public project directory.
Yeah, well, who cares? So we're not doing that. But yeah, occasionally, and it's pretty occasional to be honest with you, but occasionally someone will be like, hey, I've got this thing, and here's a URL to a project page, and those are hard to figure out. Those aren't sequential and that kind of thing.
Clearly means they have administrative
you are in the
access
site,
to the
so
site,
can you add me to the project page? Yeah, sure. Because all you're going to do is add stuff, and
that's really all you can do. Yeah,
that's all. I think that solves the problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. I'll let her know. All right. That's it's been close. It's been almost 1 hour.
Time flies with you, Katz.
Yeah, we get old.
Feels just like minutes.
First time we met, like 2009. Yes.
With kids.
Yeah, I didn't have any kids. I wasn't even married. All right. So, any other stuff that you want to add to the community, like?
Yeah. First off, I just want to say thank you to the community. I know I said earlier that we don't have a massive, really defined roadmap document for the nearest future, and that's only because we're kept busy by the good submissions that we get in GitHub. So the vast majority of things for 8.2.1 and 8.2.2 are things that are coming from the community, and sometimes they're unsolicited and they're just really good, and then sometimes there are bug fixes for things that we know we need help on, or that we didn't know that we needed help on, but it was a bug. So that is really great that we can have regular substantive releases where the stuff that we contribute is a drop in the bucket compared to the stuff that other people contribute. Mm-hmm. In terms of wanting to people who want to contribute and want to know what we would really need help with the most, we are pretty active at using the labels that we have in GitHub. I'm not 100% sure that they're the best labels ever, but they seem to make sense, and there's a couple in there. The type is pretty obvious, like bug or feature, etc. Obviously, if things that have the type of bug on there, you can be pretty clear that one of us has looked at it and says, oh, I believe that this is probably legit and it's something that we want to fix. Then there's also we don't have a priority or severity in there, but we do have whether we'd like to have something or whether we would really love to have it. And if there's a must, then that's something that you're going to see me worrying about before too long. But if there's if you go in there and you search for bugs or features that we have we'd love to have, there's at least 50 to 100 things in there that probably have a like to have or love to have, and just post a message on there and we'll start working together on how to get that in.
Yeah, something I'd add to that, if you're looking to contribute in ways other than code, or you're looking to the project and saying, why aren't they doing that, or why isn't this something that people care about? I think a good answer to that today is finding ways that you can take bites out of the pie for us and see how you can add that level of caring to that portion of the project. I think these days we're seeing a lot more of that with things like the PRB being ran by the community members, and things like the e-commerce being taken over, and now this discussion about documentation. I think that's where concrete5 is really going to excel, having more and more community members take over the parts that they really care about and that they're really affected by. And I think that's, if you find things that seem like a good thing to take over, feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's all right. All I would add is look at Express. Like I'm sure there are any number of things that would be low-hanging fruit that anyone could look at and be like, oh, it'd be really nice if we had this in Express or that in Express, or added a new relationship type, or I built a hook to make it work with this third-party service. And as you can tell from the questions that you're asking us, we're all very excited about the potential of the thing, and we're using it to solve problems. But it is absolutely the brand new hammer in our toolbox, and so we kind of look at it and go, gee, mostly I just see screws right now, and I think I could use this on that. No, that's for nails. So we need more people using that hammer and nailing things in and saying this was great except XYZ, and then those become GitHub issues. And sometimes those are huge issues that we drop everything and fix right then because some agency is like, look, we bought into this and it's not working, and we certainly have done exactly that for people. Like, okay, sorry, let me get this behaving for you. But there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for for people to contribute without it having to be, oh, geez, I'm going to have to spend 1,000 hours architecting some big thing that they might not even accept. And I feel like when you hear Andy saying, we're really stable and there isn't a lot on the roadmap, what he means there is that there isn't big unknowns that require months of architecture and these kind of nebulous abstraction layer framework conversations. It's really more about just moving the thing forward and getting it done and using it. So should be plenty of opportunities for people to help.
So what people should do if they want to help, like for example, issuing a ticket on the GitHub?
Well, what I do when I'm trying to propose a new feature is I will write up a issue, and you can find these if you search GitHub issues in concrete5 today for proposal. You'll find a bunch of these. And it's basically just writing up, like, here's what the basic idea is, here's what I think is going to change, what's going to break, what the implications are going to be. And so I'll write that up, submit it to GitHub. And there's a lot in there. There's a lot of people focused on their own things. And so what I'll do then is I'll find people who I know are going to be either affected by it or are going to want the feature, and then I'll reach out to them and see if they have anything to add to the card, whether it be positive or negative. So then when I actually reach out to Andy to actually go over the new feature, it's not just me like trying to articulate my feelings. It's more like here's what other people thought and pushed back on, and how we overcame that. And I think that's probably the best way to get something that's like a whole new feature. You have to really convince people that this is something that we want. Write it up and then get your friends to comment on it and say what they think about it. And I think that's probably the best way.
Don't skimp on the why, right?
Yeah.
Like when I'm trying to get you guys to care about things, I mostly focus on why. Hey, dude, this client's super pissed because all these it doesn't do what we need. Here's what I've tried. Here's why I don't think we have the tools we need. Here's a solution. Okay, that's great too. But if you just start with I'm adding this stuff because it's cool, no thanks. Like there's nothing cool enough that we would just add it, because there's just so much risk at this point of adding something that's going to break something else. But if you take the time to be like, this is why we need this and what it's going to solve and why I can't do it with the tools I have now, sometimes you're just wrong, right? Sometimes it's like, dude, turn on advanced permissions.
Yeah.
We've got that done. Like, this is totally covered already. And so it's just a nice learning experience. And other times it's just the night and day. Like, certainly with the internationalization stuff, we've had that experience all day. Like, we don't know. Does anybody here speak a different language except for Katz? No, we have no idea what we're doing with internationalization. So it's very easy for us when we've got smart people who are like, listen, we need this because X. It's like, all right, I trust you. Great.
Yeah,
and
that's a perfect example.
Right, and along those lines, a lot of the time people will submit new features that will solve problems, but really the underlying issue is somewhere else. So for example, somebody wanted to override some aspect of concrete5 and found that it was difficult, and so they were like, well, let's build this thing that's going to make it easy. But really the answer is like, well, we should make sure that this is easily overrideable. And that kind of solves the problem at hand. But that, you know, naturally happens in the comments. But I think Katz brought up the idea that you have an issue open and there's just no replies on there.
Get in Slack, get some people to buy into your why. If you've got if you found a hole or if you've got something that concrete5 really can't do, people will definitely jump on board with you.
Right.
And if you haven't, they'll steer you in the right direction.
Right, and with things like with Michele in his Locati's work in translation, like if you submit a feature asking about translation stuff, I'm gonna go to him.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's might as well, you know, he's the guru there. So if you already know that, you know, might as well poke him because he's happy to be poked.
Yeah, if it's internationalization, I want to be poked too. So and Hishi and our Japanese members. So, all right. So, last question. So, yes, you like to add something?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of exciting stuff is coming down the pipe. Things that will keep concrete5 in the fore of your mind for a long time. And we wouldn't be able to do any of it if it wasn't for everybody in the community and all the different work that they're doing. So I think, you know, as a whole, we want to thank everybody from people who are using concrete5 to bang out sites and we've never heard from and you just love using it on your own, that's fine. You know, we've mentioned some names today, but just because they're stuff that we're working with now, I'm sure we forgot all sorts of important people who are doing great stuff, and we wouldn't be here without everybody and everything that they've submitted. So we are deeply thankful of everybody pitching in and building this together, and excited for the cool things that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, and just to, you know, piggyback on that, like, I think you've seen concrete5 kind of grow from something that, you know, we've done primarily in-house to something that's done with the help of community members all over the world, and that's been the case for a long time. And I think we're sort of primed at this point to make another big jump where we, you know, grow the active members of our community working on concrete5, whether it's code or documentation or marketplace reviews or helping people, you know, another 10x over the next few years, just as we get better systems in place to really, you know, increase the efficiency of the concrete5 community as a whole. And that would not be possible without all the people who have been with us thus far. And we're really excited to be where we are and to, you know, see where we're going to get. So thank you.
Yeah, you guys really covered the thank yous well. One thing that I want to say is I'm really thankful that our community is so positive. We have such a positive community. Like there's never anybody really out there, you know, shouting at us or, you know, we have a really positive community, and it seems like everybody's always focused on making things better. And I think we've been doing a really good job at handling that better. And I really like to see the ways that those contributions, you know, lift us up and make us a better CMS. And I think that that's, you know, that's one of the keys that concrete5 has that other CMS don't. We have a really good community that's really positive and really invested in our future. So I'm very thankful for that.
Thank you.
Because there's a good leadership.
Oh, and thank you as well.
Yeah.
You have stuck
9
with us for a long time, man.
Oh my God!
Do you know what user number you are?
Huh?
Do you know what user number you are on?
954.
Oh, that's
Pretty good.
Oh,
Or 957 or something like that. Less than
first 1,000.
Yeah.
Well,
That's.
maybe a
I
special
mean, in a
badge for
community of 200,000 plus.
almost
that's-
300,000 at this
Yeah.
point.
I haven't checked in a while.
Yep.
Dang.
Every day.
All right, so that's all. Thank you very much for the long interview.
Hey, thank
All
you,
right,
Katz.
thank you. Thank you.